Hey everybody, it's the ENT podcast coming at you. It's just going to be Erik again this week, and today I'm going to be bringing you my picks for Week 14 of the NFL season. I'm going to give you my lock and my upset, of course, and then I'm going to be going over how I feel the college football playoff committee ranked the teams. Were they wrong? Were they right? I'll let you know. But first, get into the game picks. It's going to be the Thursday night game, Jaguars at the Titans. The Jaguars are still going with Cody Kessler. They will have Leonard Fournette back, but the Titans have won 3 straight against the Jaguars, and I expect that to keep going. They just seem to have the Jaguars number, and I think it's going to continue. Moving on to the first Sunday game, it's going to be Giants at the Redskins. This isn't too hard. Mark Sanchez is probably closer in skill level to Eli Manning than we'd like to admit, but it's still probably pretty far. The Redskins only managed to get 53 yards of offense in the second half versus the Eagles, if that tells you anything. And also the Giants have Saquon Barkley, so I'm going to pick the Giants there, mainly because Mark Sanchez has only been there since the middle of November. Moving on to the Saints at the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers have the 30th ranked defense in the league as far as points against, and going up against a Saints team that's looking to bounce back from a disappointing loss to the Cowboys where their offense just couldn't get anything going. I think this is exactly what the Saints need. The Saints did lose to the Buccaneers earlier in the season. They will look to sort of bounce back from that and get a little bit of revenge too. That's why I'm going to pick the Saints to win in this one. Moving on to an interesting game. It's going to be the Patriots at the Dolphins. And why this game is interesting to me is Tom Brady is 7-9 in his career at Miami. So the odds are he's probably going to lose, I guess, if you're just going to go with the statistics. But the Dolphins starting cornerback Xavier Howard is going to miss this game. I think that's going to go a long way to the Patriots winning this game. I remember last year when they played in Miami, they were shut down and embarrassed. Now, I don't think this is going to happen to the Patriots this year. I think Tom Brady's going to get a little bit closer to 500 in Miami in his career, and the Patriots are going to get a win. Moving on to the Ravens at the Chiefs. This is a pretty interesting game to me, too, as well. Just because the Ravens have the number 1 defense in points against, and the Chiefs have the number 1 offense in points against. And so we're going to see what wins the game, offense or defense. And in this one, I'm going to go with the offense just because I don't think Lamar Jackson, I know he's 3-0, but I don't think he's going to be able to keep up with what the Chiefs are going to put up on the scoreboard, which I think is going to lead to a Chiefs W. Now, moving on, it's going to be the Colts at the Texans. This is usually a pretty good matchup. It's a divisional affair. The Colts are coming off a weird, tough game last week. They lost 6-0 against the Jaguars. I think that was sort of an outlier week. I'm not going to pay too much attention to it just because it's a divisional matchup and sort of weird things happen on those games. Now the Texans, they're on an absolute tear right now. Their offense and their defense is great. They've won 9 in a row, which is just crazy after starting 0-3. But I'm going to pick a Colts upset in this one. I'm feeling a Colts win. I think it's going to be a really close divisional matchup, and I think the Colts are going to win it by a hair. Moving on to the next game, which is going to be the Falcons at the Packers, and this is a matchup of 2 teams with forgettable seasons. The Falcons and the Packers just have disappointed this year, and for different reasons. The Falcons because of injuries mostly, and the Packers just because they've looked out of sorts, and it was kind of expected when they fired Mike McCarthy. I wasn't sure if they were going to do it in season. I don't know if it was the right move. I'm not quite sure if I'd do that to a coach that had won my team a Super Bowl, just knowing they're not going to make the playoffs regardless. So, why not? I guess they want to see if Joe Philbin could be their next head coach. I don't think he's going to be. I mean, I've seen him coach from the past, and he hasn't been good. So I'm going to pick the Falcons in this one just because I think they've downgraded in head coach just as far as for this game. I think they're going to be sort of out of sorts a bit, are the Packers, so I'm going to pick the Falcons. Now, moving on to another game, it's going to be Panthers at the Browns. Now, the Panthers need to bounce back or their season is going to end before the playoffs begin, because if they lose to the Browns, that's going to put them at 6-7, I believe, and I don't see him coming back from that. Now, the Browns have a solid defense, but Baker Mayfield can't turn the ball over 3 times if they expect they're going to win this week. And, with Panthers having Christian McCaffrey and how well he's been doing this season, I think he might be able to carry the load for the offense. I've seen Cam Newton lately. He doesn't exactly look like the picture of health. His shoulder might be bothering him. It doesn't look like he can put as much into the throws as he has been in the past. And I think he might just be feeling it a little bit, sort of later in the season. Hopefully he can get a little bit healthier. Hopefully they can make the playoffs. And I'm going to pick the Panthers in this one just because it'd be a real shame if Christian McCaffrey has the season he's having and they don't even make the playoffs. So I'm going to pick the Panthers in this one. And moving on, it's going to be a divisional matchup. Jets at the Bills. And when I look at this, it is just a tale of 2 teams I never want to watch. Josh Allen at least is playing better and using his legs as a bit of a weapon, whereas the Jets offense is just bad. They're decent at running the ball, but other than that, they can't really do anything. Neither team really puts up points, and the difference here, as far as what can set these teams apart, I think, is the Bills' defense is better than the Jets, and that's why I think the Bills are going to win this one. And if you look at the matchup the Jets and the Bills had earlier in the season in New York, the Bills sort of ran the Jets out of town. So this being a home game for the Bills, I think they're going to back it up and win again. Moving on to the next game, which is the Broncos at the 49ers. I think this is just a game where 2 teams are going in different directions, and I think that's a story with a lot of matchups that we're going to talk about later. The Broncos have been playing great lately. They've had a couple big wins against the Chargers and the Steelers, whereas the 49ers, after losing Jimmy Garoppolo very early in the season, have just looked bad all around. And Nick Mullins is nothing special, so I think the Broncos are going to win this one pretty easily. Now, moving on to a pretty similar thing, the Bengals having lost Andy Dalton for the season with a terrible defense, with the Chargers coming off a big win against the Steelers. I'm looking for the Chargers to roll the Bengals this week. I don't think it's going to be close. I think they're going to beat the brakes off the Bengals, so I'm going to pick the Chargers to win. And now moving on to a similar game, I have to say, is the Steelers at the Raiders. The Steelers are coming off a tough loss, I know, but I think they're going to rebound against a bad team in the Raiders. The Raiders just don't do many things well. They don't have many weapons on offense. They don't have many pieces on defense. So I think the Steelers are going to really beat up on the Raiders. Now, having said that, this would be the perfect trap game for Big Ben to go on the road and just be terrible. And I think we've all seen it before, the Steelers going into a game where they should win and it shouldn't be close, but it is very close and they just squeak it out at the end. I hope that's not what happens because I'm going to pick the Steelers here to win. But I just want people to know that it's very possible for them to just lay an egg against an easy team. We see it a lot. This could be the team. I don't think it's going to be, but you never know with the Steelers and how they're going to play. And moving on to a game I think is going to be a little bit closer. It's the Eagles at the Cowboys. The Eagles need to win this to stay in contention for the NFC East, but they're going up against a Cowboys team that's coming off beating one of the best teams in the league in the Saints. Their defense looks great. Their linebacker, Leighton Vander Esch, the rookie, looks incredible. He looks Urlacher-esque. That's how great he looks. So, having said that, I'm going to pick the Cowboys to keep rolling, keep the momentum going, and head further in and even closer to locking a ticket up for going to the playoffs. Now, moving on to a game that means nothing pretty much to playoff contention. That's going to be the Lions at the Cardinals. Now, what I don't think a lot of people realize is the Lions had a chance to actually win the game against the Rams last week if things go a little bit differently in the fourth quarter, and I think that's sort of the story for the Lions the whole year. Matthew Stafford just hasn't been as good as he has been in years past. It's just regressed. I'm not really sure why. He just hasn't been as clutch. And looking at this Cardinals team, they're coming off a pretty big upset against the Packers. The Cardinals caused a team to fire their coach. I never really thought I'd say that, but if you're letting the Cardinals convert a 3rd and 23, I think you probably should be fired as a head coach. And I'm going to take the Lions in this one just because I think they're a little bit better at everything than the Cardinals. Moving on, it is the Rams at the Bears, and this could potentially be the game of the week with two heavyweight NFC playoff contenders going at it. Mitch Trubisky should be back in this game, and the Bears are going to look to bounce back from a very disappointing loss against the Giants in overtime, where they looked like they really kind of might have won in that one when they drove down and tied it up with that trick play and got into overtime, and then the next thing you know, the Giants kick a field goal, and Chase Daniel just can't bring the Bears down the field. But with Mitch Trubisky back, their offense should be a little bit better. Although they are going up against a Rams team that could, potentially score 50 on anyone, even though they haven't been playing as great as they have been lately. And I did say it just before this, but they did almost lose to the Lions if things bounce a little bit differently. It could have been a very different game. Having said that, I'm going to pick the Rams in this one to play a little bit better. I just don't think the Bears defense is going to be able to stop the Rams to put a lid on them, and I don't think the Bears offense is going to be able to keep up with an explosive Rams offense. So I'm going to pick the Rams in this one. Moving on to the Monday night game, this is the last game I'm going to pick. This is the Vikings at the Seahawks. Now, looking at the Vikings, they played poorly on both sides last week against the Patriots, and I think they really need to hand the ball off to Cook. That is Dalvin Cook more often. When he got the ball last week against the Patriots, he looked good, and they just sort of went away from it for some reason when they started losing. I'm not really sure why, because they weren't down by such an amount throughout the game that they couldn't have run the ball successfully and come back into it. And I don't know, maybe that's coaching, maybe that's DeFilippo, the offensive coordinator there, not looking great. So that's something to look at. I think they really should try to run the ball more. And they're going to be going up against a team that runs the ball great in the Seahawks, and they are on the rise and looking to stay there. And I think Pete Carroll has done a fantastic job with this team down the stretch of this season. They looked bad early on, and they have absolutely righted the ship, and I think they're going to make the playoffs. So I'm going to pick the Seahawks here. I think this is just a really good team right now, coached really well. And at home, the Seahawks are very hard to beat, so I'm going to pick the Seahawks in this one. Just a note to finish my pick segment, I just wanted to let all the listeners know that I've been doing these picks since week 1 before I even started the podcast. And so far this year, just so you know how I've been doing, I'm 118 and 64, which is about a 64.83% success rate for picks on the season. Now, I don't really want to brag, but I think that's pretty good. So, moving on to my lock and upset of the week, it is going to be the Chargers over the Bengals. I don't see a way the Chargers lose against a backup quarterback and the Bengals defense. It seems incomprehensible to have the Chargers lose this one. And my upset is going to be, now you've already heard it, and I've called this one, it is the Colts over the Texans. I just think the Colts offense is going to bounce back, and they have a real good shot of beating this Texans team and, ending that win streak, that historical win streak. Moving on to my top 10 teams in the NFL going into Week 14. Starting off at number 10, we have a new team that is going to be the Seattle Seahawks at 7-5. Now, this Seahawks team is looking better and better each week. They are running the ball really well. Rashad Penny is sort of showing flashes of why the Seahawks thought he was a first-round talent. And, they have just been playing really good, and I think they're going to keep playing good, and I think they're going to be about the 5 seed in the playoffs. So that's why they're coming in here at number 10. Now, moving on to the number 9 spot, that's going to be the Bears at 8-4. They're moving down 3 spots from last week, and that's just because you can't stay up in the list if you're going to lose to the Giants. The Giants are bad, the Bears are supposed to be good, and the Giants beat the Bears. So I don't know what to tell you. You can't stay up at 6 if you're going to be bad and lose to the Giants. And they're kind of lucky to stay in this list. So moving on to 8 is going to be the Steelers at 7-4-1. The Steelers team is coming off a loss, but it was a really close loss to a really good team in the Chargers. And I think at 7-4-1, they're still positioned really good to make the playoffs. They shouldn't worry about that. If they can just play their game and not have any distractions like the Steelers usually do and just play good football, I think they won't have a problem. But because they lost and because they're just sort of unpredictable, I got them here at 8. Now, moving on to another team that hasn't moved, it's going to be the Texans at 9-3 at 7. Now, I know they won another game and they're on a 9-game winning streak, but I just can't say the Texans are better than the teams above them, especially some of the teams that have beaten them, being the Patriots. I can't say the Texans are better than any of those teams. And that's just because I know Deshaun Watson's good, but I don't think he's the complete package. I don't think he makes the best decisions. I think he's an elite talent, and I think he does things that are very hard to defend, especially his mobility. But I just don't think he is at quite a top-tier level yet that he can carry his team. And I know their defense is good, but they're just going to have to be 7 here because I think the teams above them are better. And we're going to start that off with number 6 being the Cowboys at 7-5, who move up 4 spots after beating the Saints last week. The Cowboys defense looks incredible. I know that might be recency bias because they just stopped the best offense in the league, but I mean, they just stopped the best offense in the league. What do you want me to say? I got to move them up. And they've been looking really good lately. This week, they're going to have to prove it again going up against the Eagles. I think they're going to do it. And, we'll see where they keep on moving up, but the Cowboys are looking good at 6. Now, moving on to the 5 spot, that's going to be the Patriots. And the Patriots have been here for the entire list. And that's just because they haven't played any really good team since then. I know they played the Vikings last week, but if you notice, I don't even have the Vikings in the top 10 anymore. That's how I feel about them. So I'm going to put the Patriots here at 5. I don't think they did enough to be moved up because I think teams above them have just been playing better against better teams. And, we haven't seen the Patriots play against an elite team in a long time, and I wouldn't consider the Vikings elite. I think maybe last season they were elite. I think this season they're above average. So that's why the Patriots are going to stay here at 5. Now moving on to the Chiefs, who are going to be at 4. They're going to move down 1. They were at 3 last week. They're at 10-2. And that's just going to be because the Chiefs barely escaped the Raiders last week. And I'm not saying they lost to them. I know that. But you can't barely escape the Raiders when these other teams are having great performances and expect to not move down, especially if you're so high on the list at 3. That's why I moved them in at 4. It was an unimpressive performance, although their offense did still look great. It's just this defense that keeps bothering me about the Chiefs. At some point, I need to see them hold a team to under 25 points if I'm going to think they're going to go anywhere as far as deep runs in the playoffs. I just want to see it once. I want to know they can do it. I know they're still a great team. That's why I have them at 4, but their defense is just so bad. I mean, the Raiders almost beat them. That's how bad the Chiefs' defense is. Now, moving on to the 3 spot, I have the Chargers moving up 1 to flip-flop with the Chiefs. The Chargers coming off a win against the Steelers, whereas the Chiefs, with that mediocre win, I think the Chargers deserved it. I think they're looking phenomenal right now. Their defense is playing better. I know they let in 30 points, but I mean, they're playing the Steelers. They have one of the best offenses in the league. They're not going to be able to stop them. I think, Joey Bosa being back and healthy really has impacted this team. And with the offense being the offense that it is, I mean, Keenan Allen looks great. The Steelers did do something weird, sort of an unorthodox coverage by literally leaving him open on all plays. It was a strange strategy, and it didn't work. Usually teams try to cover number 1 wide receivers. The Steelers didn't choose to do that. That was strange, but, the Chargers took advantage of it, and they won. And that's why they're at 3. Now, moving on to 1 and 2, this might surprise some people. I have the Rams at 2 and not moving anywhere, which in turn means I still have the Saints at 1 coming off a loss. Now, let's work at the Rams first, and what can I say? They won, but they really almost didn't against a Lions team that isn't going to make the playoffs, that isn't very good. Now, I know the score is a little bit better than it looked because of that turnover the Lions had in the fourth quarter, something they had done before. I just think the Rams were a little bit lucky in this game, which is why I'm not moving them past the Saints, even though the Saints lost. I'm keeping the Saints at number 1 because I think, it happens sometimes. Teams don't play great. They were on a Thursday night. Thursday nights are hard for offenses. They were an away game. So I think things were just sort of stacked against the Saints. I'm not sure if that was a Sunday night game it would have gone the same way. And we have to look at it. There was 2 minutes left, and the Saints still had the ball, so they did have a chance to win that game. They only lost by 3. I think they're going to bounce back and still be a favorite for the Super Bowl coming out of the NFC. That's where they're going to stay at number 1. And that concludes my top 10 teams in the NFL going into Week 14. Now, the last thing I'm going to cover this week is going to be my reaction to the playoff committee's final playoff rankings. I'm going to go over the top 6 because that's pretty much the top 6 teams were the teams that had a shot at making it in, 5 and 6 being Georgia and Ohio State. And I'm going to start at 1, work down to 6, tell you my thoughts. Quick with Alabama, they're the best team all year, and I think they have the best win all year against Georgia. Pretty simple keeping them at 1. Going to 2, Clemson. I think they look great most of the year. Clearly the second best team with Georgia's loss. I don't know. I think Clemson has the best shot to beat Alabama because their defense is phenomenal and their freshman quarterback is very good as well. I think Notre Dame at 3, you can't really move them. They were undefeated, but I do have doubts if they're for real. It just reminds me of when they went undefeated and got hosed by Alabama. I think it's going to be a similar thing when they play Clemson. Although I think if they can stop the run against Clemson, they have a shot if they make that freshman quarterback do everything just because he is a freshman. I don't know if he can do it when the pressure's on. I think that could give Notre Dame a shot. And looking at number 4, Oklahoma, I think they're their most entertaining team. I think they avenged their only loss in the season. They were already ranked ahead of Ohio State, and then they got a better win than Ohio State did last week. So I think it is fair to put Oklahoma at 4. Now at 5, Georgia, I think they're probably one of the 4 best teams, but if they put them in at number 4, then they're basically saying a loss doesn't matter. I think at some point a loss needs to matter. They had their second loss. Oklahoma avenged a loss that they had already had, and only having 1 loss, I understand putting Oklahoma instead of Georgia, even though I probably think Georgia could beat Oklahoma and Notre Dame and possibly Clemson and possibly Alabama if they play them again. Just you can't put in a team that loses twice because, I mean, the record has to matter at some point, and that's why they're at 5, and I do agree. I agree with that. Now with Ohio State at 6, all I have to say is you can't lose to Purdue by 29 and expect to find yourself in the playoffs. I feel bad for Urban Meyer. That cyst in his brain that really sucks that he had to step down. And he's not going to be able to coach this last bowl game. He's been a phenomenal coach everywhere he's been. And just a quick thing to point out, a quick thing for you guys to look at. If Urban Meyer can get healthy, I think people should start to expect and look for him to maybe be the next Packers head coach. That's just what I think. I haven't heard that from anywhere. There's obviously no source that I have that's going to connect them. But I just think if you look at it, Urban Meyer's a great head coach. He's been great. He's young. I think he's still 54. If he can get his health figured out, I think he could be in the front running to be the next Packers head coach. And that's going to do it this week. I hope it's been interesting. I hope you've enjoyed it. I am Erik, signing off. Hope to see you next week. Thank you.